for the technical difficulties here. I was just saying I've been using a new webcam lately. I hope that the quality has looked a little bit better as a consequence. Um, but now nobody is here. Okay, I had people and now I lost people and now they're gone again. Okay, well at any rate, people can watch this afterwards or join me in a little bit. I'm going to talk about what's going on in Congress. Before I do, I need to issue an apology or a retraction. Yesterday, I misspoke when I was talking about because it was on my mind because I had just talked about. Oh, some people are starting to populate now. Okay. It was on my mind yesterday. I did a live stream with Starsky, and either in the stream or um, uh, either while I was talking to Starsky in the stream or beforehand when I was talking to him, I was talking about the problems around the world, right? So Venezuela is looking like something's popping off there. Serbia, I was watching just 2 months ago, 3 months ago, and it looked like something was about to set off in Serbia. And so I mentioned yesterday in my three big stories that something about Serbia related to the EU. Like, if I was Putin, I'd be like, okay, I got Orban in my pocket. If that's a fail safe, you have Slovakia, and then if that's a problem, then Serbia. Serbia is not in the EU. I misspoke. I just had that in my head as one of the trouble spots around the world. I might even have said that in that live stream there before, but I'm issuing a retraction because if you don't issue retractions when you misspeak, and when somebody called me out on that yesterday, I said, "Ah, you're right. I'm wrong." I stand corrected immediately when I saw the comment. So you have to do that. If you don't do that, if you act like redacted, so remember the East Seisman video about uh, the two yachts video that Zelensky's got these two yachts and he's got people buying these $75 million yachts on his behalf, and redacted picked that up and ran with it, and I showed excerpts of that. The next day, redacted's video was gone. I don't know that it had anything to do with me. It's probably more about East Seisman than me, but they didn't retract anything. They just pulled it and acted like everything's okay. You can't do that. I mean, you lose all credibility if you do that kind of stupid stuff. Okay, today I want to talk about Congress, and I will answer any of your questions. So just start putting your questions in the comments in the chats, and I will answer those. But in the meantime, I want to talk about it more generally and the way that we have a system. And this is perplexing to most people that come from a European parliamentary kind of system because we do things differently. We have a winner take all system, and the winner take all system is the kind of thing that encourages um, two parties, because if you have a winner take all and you only need a majority of 50% plus one in order to win, then you want to be bigger. So that's part of what's hurting the Republican Party right now, because the Republican Party kind of needs the Trumpian um, populist isolationists in order to have a larger majority than their opponent, right? And for many years, it was the Democrats that actually were made up of more little components than not, and they would cobble together all the oppressed peoples, the poor, the downtrodden, the whoever they could figure out, whether it was farmers or whether it was inner city or whether it was whoever they thought was downtrodden. So they cobble together as much of a majority as they can on either side. Now, as long as you have this system, you're going to have a two-party system. The real action in a two-party system is in the primaries. So that's where you can make a change, not in the actual general, because then, okay, at any rate. But there is some genius to the system as well. Jordan Peterson talked about this, and the way he described it was that half the people, or everybody, gets about what they want, about as a compromise about what they want about half the time, right? This party's in power, you don't like it. That party's in power, you kind of get what you want. I mean, and there is something to it. So I don't see, to answer the question that I'm sure I'm going to get, I don't see anytime soon that we're going to be moving to a parliamentary system, but that's the solution that I keep seeing being said. Okay. Okay, the big cat said Hamas, Venezuela, Ukraine, Serbia, all related to a larger game plan. So I don't know that it is related to a larger game plan in the sense that like it's all connected, but I know that every trouble spot that comes up makes Putin's life a lot easier in dealing with Ukraine. So I don't know that Putin is, pulling the strings behind, but I'm sure that he's happy to see any trouble spot that pops up. Israel, the October 7th attack from Hamas on Israel was a gift to Putin. I don't mean that Putin caused it. Maybe he has. I haven't been able to prove it. I won't say that he has because I need to have definitive proof, but it was a gift to him. I mean, it it just made Ukraine that much easier because attention diverted from there. Same thing with Venezuela. um, I think so I was what I was doing on Thanksgiving? After Thanksgiving, instead of watching football, I was watching documentaries about Serbia to get myself caught back up to speed on what was going on in Serbia over the last 30 years in order to understand, because I believe that that's going to be a hot spot that has a great deal of potential to kick off. So that's the nerdiest thing you're going to hear today. Okay. Okay. So tell me what your questions are about what's going on in Congress. I'm not alarmed because there's kind of a game that's being played, and I hate to say that it's a game. So I was reading a when I say it's a game, I say that it's a normal political process, and it's not geared to work right. It's not geared to be smooth. It's designed to prevent any one party from taking over and running roughshod over anybody else. Like just it's designed to prevent tyranny. It's not designed to actually operate correctly. So if you know what the machine's designed to do, then it makes a lot more sense. So I was reading Politico this morning, and I'm just going to read you a couple paragraphs while you start to populate your questions. Lindsey Graham, who is full-throatedly supporting Ukraine just a few months ago, seems like he is like, what happened? Did he switch? No, he didn't switch. He's playing the political game. So here's the Republicans' predicament. If a Republican like Lindsey Graham, who supports Ukraine, tries to push over his own party members, just support Ukraine, that's not a winning formula long term because he's got to get along with them. But if he can push on the opponents, on the Democrats, in order to get some progress, in order to achieve the Ukraine objectives while he's getting his party members' objectives in the process, that's a winning formula. And so that's, I think, what's going on. There are some questions that popped up about, I heard General Saluzhny is being replaced. Is this true? I know nothing about it. Um, I, I've not heard anything. I've not seen anything. I can't speak to that. Second question here is, what do you think of Chris Christie? I don't think he has much of a chance to win, but it's a wild card, right? About this, well, not this time, but uh, in the early fall of the 2016 election cycle, if you were a gambling man, you should have put your money on Jeb Bush. That's George Bush's brother, who everybody thought was going to win, and he turned out to flatline. Right, nothing happened. Trump just stormed in and was became the candidate. So, I mean, it could happen, but I doubt it. I grew up in New Jersey. I understand how I identify with Chris Christie's how he thinks, how he speaks, all that, but much of the country doesn't. He's kind of like a little Trump in his bombast, but his foreign policy is very different. He seems to support Ukraine pretty much. So I don't think he has a shot. I think the fast money, if you support Ukraine, is should be on Nikki Haley. Um, yeah, I don't know that Christie has much of a chance. Okay, country before party. Yeah, sure. I agree. I mean, that's the way you should be thinking about it. Um, Pavel says, "I see, but I do not hear." Booted many times. Oh, I don't know. I have no idea why you can't hear. Everybody else can hear me, right? Um, Jay Cav says, on a more serious note, Russians openly state now that this whole counteroffensive cluster blank was specifically Mark Miley's conception, and he supervised it. Um, okay, so I'm sure Russia is saying that as a propaganda point. And as I said when I was talking to Starsky yesterday, what you want to do is you want to look at what Russia is saying and then say, why are they trying to communicate that message? And then that often tells you what you need to know about that. So, for example, when the CIA, or not CIA, the equivalent of the CIA director, spy chief in Russia, said that Ukraine is going to be, he's warning the United States that Ukraine's going to be their next Vietnam. Why is he saying that? Because he really cares about the US not stepping into something that they shouldn't step into, or because he's trying to warn us off to get us to stop supporting Ukraine. And it's of course that the latter. Um, there are two picks to join. Neither one gives a. I don't know, Pavli. Uh, yeah. So I don't know how your technical stuff is working on that end. Alex says Ukraine is beginning to fall apart. What the heck went wrong? I don't know that I would say that they're beginning to fall apart. I would say they so when we're talking about the counteroffensive, let's say the counteroffensive, the US wanted to, and there was a large article I went over the other day in a video feed, the Washington Post article. The US wanted them to concentrate their forces. They diffused their forces and attacked on three axes. Concentrating their forces is a great idea, but you need the air superiority in order to actually break through that. And short of that, I don't know that they could have without actually having different stuff supporting them. So it's a hard thing to say one way or another. But they're not making the traction that you thought that they were going to get, and that's a very difficult place to be. Ukraine is not falling apart, says Chief 82. I agree. It's a difficult situation. John Hoover says the accidental medic Dobroho Ranku professor. That's his whole name. Professor question: do you think the U.S. Congress will pass a better funding package for Ukraine before December 15th recess? I don't know when it's going to be, but what I am confident that they are going to do something useful. They're going to pass something. They'll find a compromise. Okay, so we said, a losing strategy is force people in your own party to just swallow this. A winning strategy is find something that they can agree on, compromise with the other side, force them to negotiate, compromise with the other side. Remember, Republicans aren't getting anything and haven't really gotten anything in the last 3 years, right? Because Biden's in charge, the Senate has a majority, right? So they found a priority that the Democrats really want. They're going to get something. The other side's going to get something. They're going to compromise. They're going to make some progress. Um, I don't see any scenario where nothing happens. I just don't. But by December 15th, I don't know. When it's going to happen, I don't know. And if you say, well, those darn Republicans, they're just terrible. They're not getting things to the Ukrainians in their hour of need. Think about how the entire world hasn't gotten things to Ukraine in their hour of need. How slow Biden has been to provide tanks or ATACMS or HIMARS or now F-16s or whatever else. This is they should know better, but they're no worse than what has happened before. And I'm not excusing it. I'm saying the reality is everyone has gone through their own political process wherever they are. Germany waiting on tanks until the US stepped up, right? I mean, it's all the same stuff. Okay. Now that being said, I want them to get it done as quickly as possible. I get that, like, okay, so I'm trying to think through how to go about doing this, and I'm going to answer your questions. But if I get to the end of your questions, I'm going to switch gears with some. I have three form letter kind of things for congressmen that I want to work our way through if I have time. Of like, here, I'm a resident in your district, and if they're neutral or a supporter or opposed to Ukraine, how you would craft the language differently. And so I want to get your thoughts about that, but I want to answer your questions first. So let's go and do that. So let's see. Aussie said no one in NATO would even try what they expected of Ukraine. That's exactly right. I mean, it was crazy, but I don't know. And the time lag caused them to be able to put up extra defenses, and that's a real problem. Everything is provided too late for maximum effectiveness. That's right. And it was provided too late by everyone. The Republicans are just late to the party and providing late. Ukraine is bold. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin informed members that if they don't appropriate more money for Zelensky, we'll send your uncles, cousins, and sons to fight Russia. Okay, so that's often taken out of context, because it's saying that you're going to have a larger potential problem brewing. We're not saying that we're going to draft and we're going to, right? But it was blown out. And if you look at who was saying what, it was Russian repeaters primarily who were taking that out of context and making it look worse. The Tucker Carlson types. Aussie T, they had 4 years FFS. I'm not sure what FFS is. Um, John Hoover, the accidental medic, says the Dobro Renku is Ukrainian for good morning. The Dobro, oh, sorry about me. Uh, I'm not Ukrainian. I don't claim to be Ukrainian. I'm, and people are like, well, you're married to Ukraine? No, I'm not. There's nothing there, right? I'm just an American who's looking at my own values as a conservative, believe it or not. My own values demand that I support Ukraine. So, okay. Thank you, Dohobro Renku. Good morning. Thomas O'Brien says, is anybody investigating these congressmen for Russian money? They act more like collaborators than isolationists. I highly doubt that they're taking Russian money. I would not be surprised if Russia isn't influencing some of their legislation indirectly, at least. I mean, trying to help craft obliquely craft that legislation as it goes forward, or uh, influence them in some way, but direct money, I highly doubt. Stephen Rinkshaw, if Ukraine had massed its forces in one place, would Russia have used nuclear or chemical weapon? That's a good question. That's possibility. But when the U.S. gamed it out with them, they were talking about massing, and massing is generally what you would want to do in order to punch through, right? Australia is sending equipment still. That's true, and the EU is looking like it's stepping up. Orban, of course, is the um, uh, wild card here and what he is trying to do. But I think what Orban is trying to do. Oh, now that I have more than 100 of you, rather than what I said in the very beginning, I offered an apology at the very beginning for misspeaking about Serbia and being in the EU. I said, if Orban doesn't isn't Putin's wild card, well, then he has Slovakia, and if not Slovakia, then you have Serbia. But my context, I was saying like to monkey with the EU. He can't, right? But he can start a war over there, which could be a whole different problem set. At any rate, I'm apologizing because if you don't correct when you make a mistake, then you're not really trustworthy. Okay, that's a second one today, but many of you may have missed it by coming into the live stream a little late. Okay, after my technical difficulties. Okay, let's see here. Question: if Ukraine amassed, okay, Australia is still sending. Why is everyone gloom and doom? Seriously, considering from when the war started, Ukraine's in a better place. I'm not sure that they're in a better place. I mean, the country's being beaten up pretty hard, especially in the east and in major cities where they're getting shelled regularly, or rockets sent at them. But it's 650 some odd days, and Ukraine still stands. And we initially thought the place was going to fall in 3 weeks. So I don't know. You're kind of right in that sense. Like, Russia, you're just not that tough. Like you might have been able to hold on to this for some time, but you're really not as tough as we thought you were. Okay, but it's a good point with when you were asking why is everybody so doom and gloom. Half of the GOP have no preference for Ukraine over Russia. That is just a fact. Or as Tucker Carlson said, he's rooting for Putin. Yeah, Tucker, I don't understand Tucker. And then when Tucker says something, because Tucker had credibility about other issues, his credibility from there is kind of transferred over, and people are listening to him, going, "Oh, okay, I guess that's right." Like think for yourself, people. Okay, but half the GOP have no preference for Ukraine over Russia. I want you to understand that, and I could be wrong, but I am a Republican, right? And I mix with my Republican brother, and probably more likely than most of you who are on the very progressive side or very liberal side mix with Republicans. And so when I talk to them and I understand where they're coming from, it doesn't strike me like they're pro Russia for the most part. I mean, there's probably a few of them somewhere in there, but generally speaking, they're not pro Russia. They're not even anti-Ukraine, except for the sound bites that they have picked up from Tucker Carlson about, well, I guess they're corrupt, or oh, well, NATO shouldn't have done whatever. Or what. They're really like, why are we involved? That's the primary way that it comes through, and that's, if you're Putin, you win with that, right? Because if you can get them to want to step aside and not be involved at all, that's a good strategy for you. But they're not like, we're for Russia. Like, they're not doing that for the most part. And I know it sounds weird, but Putin still wins if he can neutralize them, and that's unfortunate. And that's like, it's like, where are your first principles as a conservative? Like, looking at a democratic state being overrun by an authoritarian, and you have the means to help them, and you have an obligation after the Budapest Memorandum. What happened? Where are you? So it's baffling to me, and I'm trying to work through that as to the degree I can. Okay, this should be no good. No one has ever been able to explain U.S. politics to me that makes sense. Or should be good because, okay. So hopefully we'll unpack whatever your questions are, Robert, and we'll just flag me if I miss something. Finally, hearing good, Pavi. I'm glad you're in. I'm a Ukrainian certified by a Ukrainian major. I'm not sure what that means. John Scott says, just got here watching from beginning. Slava Ukraine. Okay, welcome. As a Limey, I get strong World War II vibes. Yeah, I've heard this before. I think where you're going. Strong World War II vibes from these isolations. So any supporting American should tell them, wait nearly a decade for our next Pearl Harbor. Yeah, I mean, there is an interesting parallel between World War II. The difference is that we didn't see Hitler coming in World War II. Hitler said that he would stop if he was, had been stopped at the Rhineland. Uh, but now, after that experience, if we don't see what Putin can become, it's like, shame, you fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, right? It's that kind of scenario. So yeah, and there is this weird, strong isolationist vibe from a lot of those that Trump excited or got going, got politically active. Okay, I sure hope the GOP nominate Christie or Haley. I don't think Christie's likely. I think Haley has potential. That's probably who I'll be voting for when it comes to my primary. Yeah, DeSantis, I don't trust, but he also hasn't gotten the traction. So we'll see how that all plays out. Australia is treating the war as a marketing exercise for Aussie weapons industry. Okay. Well, I mean, honestly, seeing how weapons work, I was reading an article about these little tiny drones that are like little spy drones that you can pop up that I mean, their footprint's so small you can't see where they are, and they're getting real-time feedback about how these drones work by employing them in Ukraine. So that's if it's a win-win and we provide them with that, I'm okay with learning on the while they're getting to use these to take the fight to the Russians. The bounce back and then they'll siege Moscow. I don't know what you're talking about here. John Hoover, the accidental. Okay, I got to stop reading that whole thing. I've spent 10 months in Ukraine as a volunteer, so I've been learning Ukrainian going back in February with long-term visa. Good on you. I mean, that's really great. Good morning. Morning in 40 minutes high. I don't know why you're saying that. Okay. Aussie says, wait, hold on. Did I skip something? Yeah, something just skipped down. Gap says, what has happened to Lend-Lease? Not utilizing that provision seems to indicate pessimism that Ukraine will be around to pay. Ukrainians would prefer debt to death. I don't know, but I think they could use Lend-Lease. I haven't seen much traction with it. So it's a provision, but I'm not sure if it has run out or just exactly what has happened. Do you think or know if Mike Johnson received a briefing on the situation in Ukraine? It seems that he changed his tune a little by saying he wants to help Ukraine. Yes, he did, but he's in a precarious position. Remember what just happened before Mike Johnson was put in. So let's talk about the real politics of this. Mike Johnson's put in after one member called the caucus to vote to oust the current speaker. Then there was chaos for a number of weeks. And then Mike Johnson was the compromise candidate that everybody thought, okay, well, he's not this guy and he's not that guy. And he was just acceptable enough to hold your nose and vote him in, right? Okay. Because, mostly because he was an unknown. He knows that he has to tread very, very carefully. And so his caucus wants to deal with the border. They've always wanted to deal with the border. They haven't had a chance. And I know some will go, "Oh, it's a fake crisis." No, if you talk to Republicans, they really sincerely think that the border is an issue. Well, why didn't they do it before? Well, Trump was working at it, and the border wall ceased as soon as Biden came into office. So it's not completed. And his caucus wants to get it done. So he can't cross his caucus, or if he does cross his caucus, then he's probably going to be out too. And we just saw that experience. So he's trying to uh, help them achieve their values, and pretty much even those that support Ukraine are supporting the, getting some border controls in place, right? And so the most fully throated supporter of Ukraine is going to think still, yeah, we need to also deal with our border crisis, right? Okay. Um, Now, that being said, that's where he is. And he's probably gotten briefings because he's going to get more information than otherwise. And knowing what he knows, he's probably so he's probably more amenable to like, let's get some kind of deal here. Um, and so now I think that's where he is. I think that's the real picture of where he is. Let's see. Is there any reason to start starting wars in the first place? Does Russia have one single justified one in terms of moral security or any other? No, but they tell themselves that they're embattled on all fronts. Well, they weren't embattled until they started a battle. Slava Ukraini, yes, it's interesting to hear, but doesn't excuse the lack of urgency. Okay, and it didn't excuse the lack of urgency anywhere else throughout this entire thing. The story of this war is that the Ukrainians got things way too slow from the Europeans, from the Canadians, from the Americans, from the Republicans. At this point, like it's like who can slow walk this fastest? It's almost a competition to see who can have the record for slow walking things. It's unfortunate, but this is now grinding the gears of uh, the political process in the U.S. I wish it would go faster. I think that arguing about this is a stupid thing to do, but that's what I think is actually taking place and why. Okay. Where am I? Something moved here. Uh, yes, a decade ago, Americans used to be Americans first and voted for party second. Now they are Democrats or Republicans before they're Americans. Not all of them, but that's painting with too broad a brush. But that's unfortunate that people are putting party over that. But it is, I think, a little unfair to say that they're putting party over that if they really sincerely believe this is an issue that is tied to American security. Uh, but again, the Ukrainians are the ones suffering from that. So that's. I wish all Republicans saw it my way, but they don't. And I'm just telling you the reality of where they're coming from. Um, let's see here. It doesn't excuse the lack of urgency. I've been calling my representatives, trying my best to help. I'm just hoping America doesn't Neville Chamberlain Ukraine because of a few bad apples. I don't see that happening. I think that the Republicans are aware that they don't want this to fall apart on their watch as well. Didn't Australia send those wonderful cardboard drones? Yes, those things were awesome. They are from Norway, I think, small drones. No, it was the Australians that sent these cardboard drones that had no like radar footprint, and that was pretty cool. But they can't pack that big of a punch. That's the trick. I mean, you have to get it to be able to sustain greater explosive power. Wayne's World of Science and Technology says Haley and Christie are based in reality. The others are living in some bizarre fantasy land. Robert says all countries are doing that. We sent only one shipment of those cardboard drones. We could be sending to 100,000 a year. I'm not sure what's slow walk or why that's being slow walked, but it'd be pretty awesome to get more of those. But of course, everything cuts both ways. As soon as the Ukrainians are doing this, it's the Russians will be able to do the same thing back in time. Sure, I keep skipping things here. Maybe support for sending weapons to Ukraine would increase if we knew how much U.S. weapon industry benefits. I'm not sure how much of an argument that is. I mean, some people will say, "Well, look, I mean, the United States is benefiting from that." Well, I don't think economically that's really fair. You're spending let's use a dollar. You're spending $1 and you're getting pennies back, or maybe a few dimes and a nickel back, or something along those lines. You're still spending that. And so if you're worried about spending that, that's not real, but it's still better than just spending a dollar and getting nothing in return. Um, but that's not a really potent argument in my estimation. My understanding is Lend-Lease authority expired. It might have. Uh, he gives Christianity a bad name. I don't know who we're talking about. I've learned something new from you being Republican professor. Conservatives can be decent. Look, I mean, we're not going to agree on everything. And if we looked at my political stances about school choice or tax credits or whatever else, we'd perhaps disagree. But we're here because we're all supporting Ukraine, and a large fraction of the Republican Party is like me and supports Ukraine. What you're hearing mostly are the loudmouths, the Trumpian side, that tend to be more. I'm not even sure what word to use, but they tend to be louder. I learned something. Okay, so Econ Lesson says is not Mike Johnson a forever Trumper? So there's also a Venn diagram kind of thing where there's some overlap between the Trumpers and the conservatives, and that needs to be there for them to be able to cooperate within the party. So, and he does support Trump in a more more robust way, but excuse me, my throat. But I think he's aware enough where he is now. When you're just voting as an individual, it's one thing, but when you're getting the security briefing as a Speaker of the House, you might be seeing things differently, and I think he might be seeing things differently now. How long did you had to study this stuff? I'm sorry, but I just don't understand American politics. If it helps, I did my doctoral dissertation on the way that it's American statesmen during the Constitutional Convention and ratification debate. So how the system was initially set up and the arguments that they made during the time when they were arguing for how the system was done. So I can answer this question all day long. That's not a problem. The president is not above Parliament. Um, so how can the speaker be above Parliament? Okay, so our Parliament is called Congress. The president is not above it. There are three co-equal branches. There's the executive, there's the legislature, that's what you call Parliament, and we call Congress. Congress is also the term for a group of baboons, as I understand it. So maybe there's something to that. And then there's the Supreme Court, and none of them can tell the others what to do, right? And this is part of separating powers to prevent tyranny. Okay, so the president is not like your prime minister. The prime minister is more like a Speaker of the House, I guess. It's kind of like that. And so that's more like where Mike Johnson is, if that makes sense. So the president can't tell Congress what to do. The president can ask. But honestly, Biden is impotent to make the Congress do anything. But it's not just Biden. Any president can't make Congress do anything. If Congress doesn't want to do it, they can be like, no. and so that's part of the problem. So it's designed that they have to work together. It's like I tell my students, cooperate to graduate, right? Work together so that you can get this done. And that's what we need to see done. Border crisis peaked in 2007, decreasing as real wages are increasing. There is something to that, but it doesn't mean that it's fixed, and it's still a issue in the minds of most Republicans. Um, and again, on the other side, there's a fraction of Democrats that want to solve it, and there's a fraction of Democrats that don't. And that, I mean, this isn't me. This is Politico. I was reading this morning, affirming that the more progressive people are, the more that they actually don't want to solve it like Republicans want to solve it. They're at odds with each other about that. And again, if you are on the progressive wing and you think that that's different, you're probably right and I'm probably wrong because I'm not you. In the same way that if I'm saying something that Republicans believe X and you're a liberal or progressive and you say, no, that's not true, they don't believe that, I'm probably more accurate because this is kind of my people. I understand my people. I think we'd be a lot better off if we listen to people who are of that identity. Like I'm a Republican and Republicans think. I can speak to that pretty clearly. And I would probably be more inaccurate talking about what the other side thinks. And that's just how human beings are. Okay, Professor, question. Do you think that the US pulls back on funding, that Europe will see this as a sign to also pull back? No, Europe's actually stepping up. And so I think that at least in the short term, the silver lining, if there is any, is that Europe is trying to step up and fill in the gap. And they need to do more and more of that because again, the isolationists will say it's not our backyard, it's Europe's backyard. Europe should be taking care of it. Well, if you're a leader within the world, you need to be leading. But I do understand that argument as well. Europe does need to step up and do more in that process. Okay, where am I? Indeed, the border crisis peak. Okay, we just talked about that. A big issue with U.S. politics is their presidential election system, which makes third parties not feasible. So citizens' views aren't properly represented. We talked about that early on, where just because we have a winner takes all system, the incentive is to mass, 50% plus one, and so you get a conglomeration on this side, and you get a conglomeration on that side, and what in a parliamentary system you can have exactly your party but then they have to coalesce afterwards. We coalesce beforehand and then vote this side or vote that side, so the actions in the primary. Okay. In Romania, the party that is funded by Putin, named Alliance of Unification of Romanians, has the main ideology of isolationism and anti-EU and the anti-NATO ideology. That's interesting, and of course, that's what Putin wants. In fact, the Polish trucker thing right now, there's 3,300 or so trucks lined up at the Polish border that can't get out through it. The truckers that are blocking it are the people that are most aligned with Putin politically, right? That's why they're doing what they're doing. Why the Polish government hasn't hauled them off, I just don't understand. But that's what's happening there. We don't have an open border. We have a ton of asylum seekers and migrant farmers, says Silver Earth. Okay, Silver Earth. My guess is that you're not a conservative. I could be wrong, but that's not how conservatives view it. They view it as open border and a ton of asylum seekers. We want to have asylum seekers for real asylum threats, but we're not proving it. And anybody can come in the border. And we've actually, found that some potential terrorists have been coming over the border as well. We don't want that to happen. We want to have like I'm a free marketeer. I'm very happy to open the doors to immigrants. I think that's a great idea, but I want to open the doors, not just let them come in the windows. If that analogy makes sense. So you fix the system, close the system, and then you control what you bring in and bring in as much as you want once you are controlling it. But again, that's where I stand. Not everybody's going to have that position, and some people don't want to have the doors that can actually close. Okay. Agreed. We always like Chris Christie in spite of myself. We're paying for our own freedom as well as Ukraine's. Mike Johnson. So Wayne's World says, I've been tracking the Canadian defense industry. Every company is hiring. Colt Canada is busy as heck. So is okay. Yeah, they probably are. The Bulwark and Lincoln Project, Republicans are all good people. I don't know who the Bulwark is. So look, I'm not going to talk bad about other factions on either side here but I am going to try to explain who they are and how they think and why they think the way that they do. I'm trying to make sense or create clarity about who they are. I disagree with members of my own members of my own party at times, and that's okay. Uh, I just think that they are off track from where they should be. Oh, something popped up here. Some super chat something. Being ignored in chat sucks. Sorry about that. I'm not trying to ignore anybody. Anyway, the Biden administration has agreed to make compromises on the U.S. southern border in order to pass the supplemental bill. Is there enough time to work a deal? Yeah, if they can work a deal, if they can get some compromises, and yeah, I think they can get a deal. I think they will get a deal. I don't see any scenario where they won't get a deal. I just think that it is important that they work this. And again, in the meantime, they're going to call each other every kind of name and say that they're bad, they're bad. Um, and that'll be in the papers. Now they'll do it in a different way. I watched the British Parliament for kicks and giggles, and when they're saying they're mocking each other when they're talking through, when the Prime Minister, he's like this, and oh here, right? They don't do that, but they still talk smack about each other about all kinds of things. On this issue, though, it's really critically important because Ukrainians are suffering. Okay. So thank you, Jamie. I'm sorry that you felt ignored. I was not trying to ignore you, I promise. Okay. Let's see. Where was I in my comments? Um, Wayne's World, Bulwark, Aaron, just saw that you were on with Operator Starsky yesterday. Yes, I was on with Operator Starsky yesterday. Congratulations. Well, I've interviewed him before as well. This was maybe 5, 6 months ago, something like that. So glad you're getting a wider audience. Your conservative voice is desperately needed. Right. And so, Jake Bro was talking about the border, and he and I don't see eye to eye on how Republicans think about that, but that's okay. We don't have to. I mean, we can have different opinions. Starsky and I didn't see eye to eye on some things yesterday. That's okay. We can have different opinions. But Jake said exactly the right thing at the end of that section where he said, look, this is a one issue channel. If you support Ukraine, this is what we're all about. Same with me. I'm not trying to convince you that school choice is optimal. Like that's a different an entirely different conversation. But if you're here for Ukraine, this is what we're, and we can all support that particular issue. Okay. What happens if Russia occupies Ukraine to the whole world to think about it? Can we afford it? My opinion is we cannot. That's my opinion. Master of None says, do you think that if Trump wins the election, support for Ukraine will stop, or do you think Trump will perhaps increase it? It's really, I know that if you're a liberal, you're on the left side of the political spectrum, your mind will melt by this. But Republicans tend to believe that if Trump was in office, this never would have happened. Now, I know you're thinking, how could that be? Trump is in Putin's pocket. Doesn't he love Putin? Isn't he? Well, Trump's an odd thing to try to understand, but the argument here is his ego would not have allowed him to let that happen. We can't know one way or another whether that's delusional or whether that's reality, because we can't counterfactually go back in time and see what would have happened. But I don't know how to predict what would happen with Trump. Trump seems to be doubling down on the fact that he can make a deal with that, and that deal probably would include cutting off Ukraine and not supplying Ukraine unless they accept a deal of giving Russia their lands, which are really Ukrainian lands. I don't know what would happen. Maybe he would think differently about it. I just don't know. Okay. Diane says 100. I'm not even sure where we are in the conversation here, where they're saying 100. Pavi just popped up with a super chat. Thank you very much, Pavi. I'm not sure if there's a question here, but I don't see a question. Okay, well, I'm not trying to ignore your chat. I'm just really not that swift with working these live streams. I'm sorry about that. Let's see. Pavi said, I'm so sad, angry about our delay with deliveries. Yeah. I mean, the story of the war is that we've delayed and delayed and delayed. What's fascinating is, so I had Serbia on my mind when I misspoke the other day in the documentary, the story of Serbia and Kosovo and Bosnia Herzegovina and was exactly that. Europe was slow walking itself into that. I don't know whose side to take or which how as Yugoslavia was breaking up. And Europe was very slow into that. NATO was very slow into that. It's the same thing. History repeats itself because we don't understand things. Would you research the involvement of Paul Manafort in the campaigns of Reagan, Yanukovych, and Trump? Do you see a pattern? Yeah, Manafort's involved in some interesting things, but I don't know. So, in the same way that Trump's about Trump, Manafort's about Manafort, and I don't know that I do see a pattern. I see involvement over there that is murky, and I'm not exactly sure, but maybe I'll look a little bit harder and see if there is something that strikes me. Very afraid of what to come by these delays, but it's my opinion. Yeah, the delays are absolutely terrible. Good news is that if you're having delays right now, while the tempo is slowing down for winter, it's probably the best time to have the delay if you have to have a delay. World of Science and Technology, Politico, their analysis sucks. Yeah, so Politico is a left-leaning American newspaper or magazine, and but they're often, even if their analysis is off, their quotes are still quoting the people that were being said. And so you can still glean insight. Look, I read RT too, not because I think RT is telling me the truth, but because I can glean what I can glean about what their perception is. I live in a town full of empty houses vacated by immigrants who fled our country. Okay. Um, I'm not sure what that was relating to. Trump's 2017 White House meeting with the Russians, what really was said, I don't know. Stefan, I think that every day my hair runs on fire and that may, okay, language, are you talking to me or are you talking to other people? Okay, I'm going to keep moving here. Secretariat movement. Why can't the Democrats support the pro-Ukrainian Republican choice for speaker instead of siding with the anti-Ukrainian side of the Republican Party? That's a great question. This was PJRJHJ, an Australian, saying that. Okay, because there's more to the story. It's not just about Ukraine. Like we're talking only about Ukraine, but the Democrats have other priorities and other issues, just like Republicans have other priorities and other issues. And I'm not blaming the Democrats, but the Democrats caused the problem with the speaker to begin with because they urged. Uh, okay, when I say they caused the problem, they inflated or allowed the problem to become the problem because the Republicans alone could not have ousted their own speaker. They did not have the numbers to oust their own speaker. It's only because the Democrats sided against McCarthy for other reasons, like they don't like McCarthy on this or the other thing, that we had this whole controversy to begin with. So Matt Gaetz is the cause, but the Democrats fueled it. And so now we have the scenario that we have. And so it's not just about Ukraine. And so you've got to factor in everything. And that's part of the analysis. Lots of let's celebrate their search for super in the live stream. I'm not sure how to celebrate. Okay. Lots of human trafficking and drugs coming over the border. It's not only over land. We have a major influx of people coming from Cuba and Haiti and Florida. Yeah, we have people coming from all over the world flooding over the southern border. So they're coming in illegally. Let's close the gates, open the door, and make people come in legally if they're going to come in. Cat big Dub Big Cat. I'm a moderate Democrat, and I can attest that most of us want rational border security policy. I still don't. What is being proposed? The issue seems very propagandized. Yeah, and it sure does. And I think Dub Big Cat. I think most of us want the same things. We're very divided, but when we really think about it, we mostly want the same stuff, and we quibble about how to get there. Most of us want peace. No, maybe Putin doesn't, right? But most of us want peace. Most of us want security. Most of us want happy, healthy life, health, family. That I mean, those. So, but we argue and we highlight the things that divide us rather than the things that can bring us together. Um, some of the comments in here are very inflammatory, like, "Oh, all those Republicans are this," or and then you'll have some Republicans saying, "Oh, the Democrats only want that." Let's focus on what we can agree on and how we can work together, especially since we're only dealing with this one track or one issue. Okay, Joe V says it's actually working together if a single person, the speaker, can prevent the Congress, or is it actually working together if a single person, Congress can prevent the Congress from expressing their will by denying the vote altogether? The way the U.S. Congress works is wild. Yes, but the Speaker of the House is elected by a majority in order to so the Speaker of the House is elected by a majority of the members, so he has the will of the people, and he gets to determine the agenda. So that's really the power of the Speaker of the House. So it is. I mean, it's baked into the process, and if you understand the system, it's a legitimate system. Um, so okay, John Hoover, and again, our system is designed not for efficiency, but to prevent any single factor from becoming a tyrant and taking over everything, right? Like that's the way the founding fathers were thinking. John Hoover says, "Thank you for all you do and your energy. I spread your videos to my friends in Ukraine and they love them. Paka, bye. Stay classy, everyone." Okay, so thank you for that. By the way, if you want to help me and help the channel and whatever, when a video means something to you, when it resonates with you, when you're like, wow, that was useful, spread it on every social media platform that you can. If you do that, if you spread it, if you go to Facebook and Twitter and whatever, wherever you are, and spread it, it helps get the message out. And if it resonates with you, I'm not asking you to just spread it, spread everything over. You don't work for me, right? But if you do, when it resonates with you, it spreads. And so I can see a connection between in the analytics when, like, last month I had 3,300 times my videos were shared, and you could see the progress. I just peaked over just past 40,000 subscribers. And I watch that because this is a measure of impact, right? Like how many people are actually hearing this message. So sharing is one of the best things that you can do to help other people think. Now there are some that are targeted, like the one about, hey, I'm a conservative and you need to hear this. I was speaking in conservative language to conservatives about Ukraine. So if they are, um, so if you're on the left side of the spectrum and you're trying to speak to a conservative, it's probably going to fall flat because you're not going to say things the same way. Same way that if I was speaking to someone on the left, a liberal or progressive, about something, trying to convince them of my points, I would probably not be the right guy. It would probably be better to have somebody else to carry that message. So that particular video, I think, um, is very useful if you have a friend or a family member or someone who is like, "Why are they speaking in Trump speak?" Well, I'm explaining how they should be thinking about it, calling them back to their conservative principles. Bill Kristol is also part of the Bulwark. Oh yeah, Kristol. Kristol was like the original anti-Trumper, and he's like a made man. Like, you know what a made man is in the mafia. Like he's part of the system within the conservative movement. His book up on the shelf back there is his father's book, Irving Kristol's book on conservatism. Conservatism. I mean, like he's like the guy. Um, yeah. Anyway. Wow, there's a lot of comments I still have to get through. I got to stop talking about my own stuff. While Russia is most likely stoking the fire, the Polish owners drive have a very valid point. Ukraine should be subjected to the same conditions as all other EU transport companies. But the EU took off the regulation, and as I understand, what the Ukrainians were trying to do is drive through the Polish border to the rest of to wherever to get their stuff out. Um, I could be wrong about that. Correct me if I am. I wish Japan could do more in terms of military aid. We send them uniforms, power generators, but those things wouldn't help them win the war if there wasn't enough munition. Well, after World War II, Japan was um, intentionally gutted from doing those kinds of things because of their Bushido kind of culture and how militaristic they were. Germany the same way. So I mean, Germany has stepped up in a huge way considering what was done after World War II to prevent them from being remilitarized. Let's see. That was too because you made my day in these dark days. Oh, thank you, Pavi. I appreciate that. The biggest problem we have is for pay new agencies and the people who watch them exclusively. I get what you're saying, but I don't think that that's it. I think the biggest problem that we have is repeaters who are on YouTube and repeaters in these websites that are trying to just be as extreme as they can and say whatever will say in order not to promote truth but to build their audience, and that's the danger. Yes, Trump already did that. He denied them javelins in 2019. Trump also did provide a bunch of aid. So I, I don't know what Trump would or wouldn't do. It's very okay, Dr. Gerdes. You give us more than we can ever give to you. I'm glad that you think so. I'm glad to be able to help. Wayne's World says if Trump was elected and the U.S. Stopped supporting Ukraine, it wouldn't end things. Other countries would try to step in, and the U.S. would lose a lot of influence. Exactly. So, if for no other reason than to support them, I think the argument is that you bring to these Republicans is, are you okay with us losing your leadership role in the world? Do you really want some other place to fill that void? And that could be in two ways. That could be losing influence with the West, or if you withdraw from the world in general, like if you withdraw from the sea lanes, like we don't want America to be the world's policeman. I don't either. But if you withdraw from the sea lanes, do you really want China being in charge of that? Or, I mean, like, how is this going to work out exactly? You got to think through the whole picture. Bruce Ingalls said, did Greg Terry give you any idea of clergy support for both Russia and Ukrainian sides for other religions? Yeah, we talked about that a little bit. And I'm connected with other organizations in Ukraine that do some great work. I mean, Christian organizations that do some work on the ground, building houses, or I gave a lecture with a Christian Open Academy in Ukraine just recently, and so there are a lot of these small independent ministries that are doing things on the ground. I'm not sure if I answered your question. I really like the professor's lighting. I usually just listen with my phone in my pocket so I don't see. Yeah, you like that? The blue and yellow is very intentional. That was by design. No, I wanted McCarthy to stay. Matt Gaetz needs to go. Well, I mean, if I had my druthers, um, is this speaker better for Dems in any way? I don't know that they got anything better than what they had before, but I so he's different than McCarthy, and so on some other issues maybe, but I don't know. Trump had 4 years to fix the border, and he was working on that. And he had the border wall going up in sections, and it ceased immediately as soon as Biden took over. And we have materials, millions of dollars worth of materials rusting in big lots that were supposed to be going up and never went anywhere. Bruce Ingles, the UAE gave a warm welcome to Putin just after he confiscated their $1 billion investment in the St. Petersburg airport. I'm not sure about the investment in the St. Petersburg airport. I wasn't paying any attention to that. So you know more than I do on this particular subject. I'm guessing nothing can be done about the ICC criminals flying over NATO airspace, such as Turkey. Not unless you're willing to somehow shoot them down, which is probably bad form. So, yeah, I don't think anything can be done about that. Ben says, you're so wrong blaming the Dems for a speakership issue. Okay, you can think that I'm wrong. It's perfectly fine with me. Of course, they would vote for their own guy, but they don't have their own guy. Like they were on that. They were just voting to remove McCarthy. So it wasn't McCarthy or until the next voting, right? The GOP started it with Gates. That's exactly right. I said that. You can't blame the Dems for that, Professor. Stop it. But I am blaming the Democrats for fueling it. The Republicans did not have the votes by themselves because of Gates, it, unless Democrats cross over to vote McCarthy out. Now, they didn't start it, but they were accessories to the crime, if we can use that. So I'm not, yeah, sometimes you all think that I'm just blaming Democrats for this or that because I'm a Republican and I must be bad. It's not that at all. I'm trying to analyze the situation. So you stop it. I just felt like saying that. And uh, I mean, the reality is that they couldn't have done it without the Democrats involved as well. Do Republicans demand Biden to, quote, solve the immigration, as Jake Crow said, or just sign some document laws that will supposedly solve the immigration in the future? So Republicans are trying to fix this, but it's really not Biden's issue to fix it. Biden would have to sign whatever law that the Congress actually made. I mean, that's the way that the system works. He can't actually do anything. Now, he could negotiate. I mean, the political article I was reading this morning said, like he was a deal maker in the Senate for 30 some odd years. He could be part of the negotiations and help that process. But as far as actually making the law, it's Congress, and he has no real say in any meaningful legal sense in that. Um, Stephen Rickshaw says political parties should be along culinary lines, Republiques and Democrazes. Okay, well, maybe. I don't know. There's probably shifting culinary tastes over time. Professor, are you going to be part of Operator Starsky's anti-propaganda project? I only caught part of your interview. I'm not sure exactly what that's going to look like, but I offered to whatever degree I can help him. I'm happy to help him. I can still speak to conservatives, but for me, Trump was beyond the pale. It says I like Bill Kristol, except for the neocon stuff. Well, the neocon stuff is why Bill Kristol is over there, is now supporting Ukraine. Politics makes strange bedfellows. So while most of you on the left probably hate Dick Cheney probably supports Ukraine. I can't say that for sure. I haven't seen anything, but like his gut would be, no, Russia's got to be stopped. Um, it's a funny thought, really. Just Keith says, how do we deal with the cable news networks who want to stir up hate and fear, which makes the company tons of money? I see some of the tactics, the whole other side are idiots on this thread. Yeah. And so cable news does that to a small degree, but the internet does it in a larger way. Twitter's probably the worst with that. False news spreads on Twitter 6 times faster than truth does. But then how do you combat that? Do you have people saying, fact checking, or do you get rid of people? I don't know that you can. And so much of the division in the nation in the last few years, I don't think could have or would have happened without social media. But I'm not sure now that you have social media, how to prevent that without. So Madison I'm trying to remember which Federalist paper. In the Federalist Papers, I want to say 30, but I could be right. I'm okay. I'm nerding out here. In one of the Federalist Papers, talked about how you deal with this with factions and parties, and the one way, if you try to cure it by removing the ability to have these factions by just having one opinion, he said the cure is worse than the disease, and we don't want to do that to Twitter and clamp down on Twitter by saying, no, you can only have this one opinion, or you're off the platform, or you're fact checked away from it, or something along those lines. Even though the potential for lies to spread is not just possible, but it is statistically proven. So I just don't know how to get around that. Fox Paw says, but we will decide who comes to this country and the circumstances in which they come. John Howard, Australia Prime Minister. Okay, I don't know what the addition is there. The Polish truckers aren't blocking the delivery of weapons to Ukraine. They're definitely not pro-Putin. No, they are pro-Putin. They're not blocking into Ukraine. They're blocking out of Ukraine, and they are of the faction that is most leaning toward Russia. Paul Ironmonger says, question, is it possible Mike Johnson could be voted out of office because of his stance on Ukraine? How likely is it? It's very likely. I think not voted out of office. I think that they could call the same thing that they did to McCarthy, and he knows that. But voted out of office by his people in his district, probably not, because he's Speaker of the House, and that's a very powerful position. Bruce Engel says, how can we help bounty hunters earn the U.S. $10 million reward to uncover rum runners circumventing the North Korean embargo? I have no idea. David T says the hesitation of military aid to Ukraine is an appeasement, not toward Russia, but toward the global South. What would that mean? I don't know. Hesitation. Appeasement toward the global South. I don't know why we'd be appeasing the global South by hesitating to give them aid. I just don't understand that question. When the Japanese see what's going on now, we're worried whether the U.S. will be there for us when a fight breaks out in our part of the world. So this is the broader point, right? I mean, so what they're saying here is very important. You have to support your allies, and if you don't, you lose credibility. So Israel, the clear, overwhelming support for Israel. Israel has been our ally. Israel is our ally. It's been our ally for since its inception. It's the only thriving democracy in its region, right? In a meaningful way, democracy. Ukraine is kind of new to the party, right? I mean, it's only since the 90s that they've been separated from the Soviet system, but we should be supporting them. But not supporting them, what does that tell other people? Like when you do things, you're sending a message to other nations simultaneously by what you do or don't do. And so we have to be extremely careful about that. Bruce says, good to hear about Ukrainian Christians. What about Russian Christian help? Rabbis, imams? That I don't know as much about. I know a narrower slice than what you're asking, Bruce. Karen Gray says, MAGA Mike is a dominionist. Where do you stand on dominionism? Can you define what you mean by dominionism? Because there's different ways that you can cut that, Karen. Terry says border wall was not effective. Historically, walls needed to be manned. Even so, how did the latest trouble in Israel start? Yeah, those are two different things. We don't have a Hamas on the other side in Mexico, and so, but as far as just keeping out people that are running drugs or things, it can tamp down some of the effect. Wayne's World of Science, the biggest issue that we have is people who operate off the belief, not reality. I'm including all believers, whether political, religious, or whatever. I think that is too much of a global statement, and I would reject that statement. But you don't have to agree with me. You can believe what you want to believe. Wow, there's a lot of questions here, and I am not going to be able to answer all of them. Phew. Okay. John's son says, Republican immigration demands literally impossible, or are they just a formality and Democrats have to vote for them and that's it? It's not exactly either. What Republicans want and what Democrats want at the border with asylum, particularly, and how you decide what asylum rules are at odds. But they're not something that's intractable. They can actually figure out some kind of compromise and get there. So I think they will get there. Professor to the angry Democrats, no, you stop it. Okay. Well, I mean, it is what it is. I'm telling you, it's not. He's saying that I'm blaming the Democrats and I have to stop it. No, the Democrats. This could not have happened without them. They're not the cause, but they did fuel the speaker being ousted, and it could not have happened without them. Okay. Thoughts about the Venezuela annexation threat of 70% of Guyana besides oil and international politics? Venezuela is allied with Russia. Are they being useful idiots to distract the West? I think Putin would love to see a hot war kick off down there. I don't know that he's causing it, but I think there's probably some connection I can't prove. But he will be the big beneficiary. Dub The big cat. Oh wait, hold on. Something just skipped. The big cat. I don't like Bill Kristol as neocon because I thought there was some hubris. I saw the drumbeat of war in Iraq, and I just thought that it was based on false premises from Francis Fukuyama. Yeah, okay, so there could be something of that, but the war in Iraq was bad intelligence. The war in Iraq was a couple things. Some sore spots from Cheney and others who were just thinking Iraq, 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 and they couldn't see. So this is why we need each other, right? Because we can't see past our own biases, and so sometimes I have biases, and sometimes you have biases, and if we get together, we can actually try to sort out whether who's thinking properly in the process. But there was also faulty intelligence in the process. Martin King says, "What happened to the uh, Ukrainian Lend-Lease program that was given from the United States?" I'm not sure. Somebody said it ran out, but I have to go fact check that to make sure. Putin is now testing the Monroe Doctrine in Esquibito. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens and if that becomes another hotspot, and if it does kick off, how the U.S. will respond. As a European, I lost my trust in the USA as a world leader, as an ally, when Trump started to signal that he would get the US out of NATO. So it wasn't just get the US out of NATO. It was more like, look, we're carrying the entire burden. You got to step up. As of about, what was it, 6 months ago, 9 months ago, I remember reading an article that only 7 NATO countries were still meeting their 2% obligation. Like, come on, Europeans, step up. This is we're not supposed to be carrying you. So that's his perspective. And you do need to step up, and you do need, like, Ukraine is your backyard. It is an international issue, and we need to not minimize that. And so we need to be involved, but it's your backyard at the same time. And Germany has, to their credit, just stepped up in a big, meaningful way. England was right there with you, and the Baltic countries, for their tiny size, were stepping up in huge ways, as was Poland. Okay, not all the aid needed given Ukraine to the West and not deciding the world politics alone. It refers to the monopolar world for the U.S. I'm for support Ukraine, by the way. Okay, yeah. So monopolar world isn't even language that generally the West uses. We don't think like that. We just think like, okay, the Soviet Union's collapsed. Good, we have freedom now if for countries that want it. Um, that's that makes me almost suspect that David T, you might not be a troll, but that would the language that you used here with the monopolar role of the US makes me suspect where you're from. I could be wrong, but if you are a troll, know that you shouldn't use that language in the future. Okay. Ben Y says, are the US Republican populists planning on cutting military spending or just not using the military? So they want to look more insular, look at our own problems, deal with our own things, and not be distracted by that. But that's like saying, I don't want to pay my light bill because I'd rather spend time with my family. you, you have to. I mean, this is the context in which you exist, right? The world is going to affect you whether you want it to affect you or not. So you can't just turn off from that. Okay, we're a little over an hour, so let me just answer a few more questions and then we'll be done. Ben, why are the U.S. Republican populists? Oh, we just said that. David T is answering somebody else. Chris Copper says Hoover Institute talk about military readiness. They say we're not ready for a two-front war. I feel Russia, China, Iran, North Korea as a group could us off with spreading us thin. Yeah, and that is the real concern that people have. And China is potentially an aggressor with Taiwan, and keeping that from happening. And in fact, that's where I'm going to end. Keeping that from happening is important, but we philosophically divide about. We want the same thing, but we're philosophically divided within the Republican Party about what's the best way of keeping that from happening. I don't want World War III. Well, I don't want World War III either, says the Trump isolationist. And so we shouldn't be involved in Ukraine. No, but we should be involved in Ukraine, because the best way, to my mind, to prevent World War III from happening, for preventing China from getting antsy and taking Taiwan, is to show China that this is a bad idea by supporting Ukraine. They'll say by not getting involved and not potentially kicking it off. Okay. At any rate, that's all that I'm gonna be able to cover. Thank you for your time and attention, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.